Hey everyone, it's Lexi. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you the top books that I've read of 2025. These are some of my favorite videos to make at the beginning of each year to reflect on all the books that I read and all that stuff. So it's always fun to kind of, reflect and look at the books that I, read over the course of a year. I also will have kind of a worst books of 2025, which will be coming out next week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But overall, I had kind of like a mid-reading month, or reading year, I should say. Overall, I read 50 books and I read a total of 12,984 pages and 107 hours and 52 minutes of audiobooks, which is roughly 4.5 days worth. So I did, despite it being kind of a meh reading month, I did tend to kind of read, a good amount over the course of 2025. I think it was just on par with how 2025 was just for me in general, not the best year. So I felt like these books were really the ones that stood out, and they're the ones that I either gave a 4 out of 5 stars or 5 out of 5 stars. There's a few 5 out of 5 stars in here, but overall it was just kind of an average reading year. But these are the ones that definitely stood out to me. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting up, I first have Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. This is the final book in the Emily Wilde trilogy. I was really excited for this when it came out. I remember it came out around the time of my honeymoon, and I got some of the fun UK editions of this book as well, which I was really excited about. But basically this one, the premise of this trilogy is that we follow Emily Wilde, who this takes place in the early 1900s, and she is a professor of the folk, basically, where we first get introduced to her where she's researching this encyclopedia, and she goes to this remote village to find out the last remaining fae and folk that need to be included in her encyclopedia. And she often butts heads with her co-worker named Wendell, and it kind of goes from there. This one is, I would say, kind of, if you are familiar with Holly Black's kind of folk world, such as Spiderwick or The Cruel Prince, it kind of is very similar to that, where the folk or fae creatures are very dangerous. They have teeth to them, they're ugly, there's just some grit to them, basically. And this one's a lot of fun. It's, in terms of the romance, I'd say it's on the spectrum of spice, I'd say it's bell pepper. So there's a little bit of romance, but it is not Bridgerton level or romance, if that makes sense, in terms of explicitness. So it's just kind of a fun, cozy fantasy, I would say, but with a really fun depth, high stakes sometimes. In this last book in the trilogy, I felt ended on a good note. I'm very sad that there isn't more in this world. Hopefully we'll maybe get, spin-off series in the future, but I was really sad to kind of finish up this trilogy and all that stuff. So like I said, it was a really fun series and I highly recommend it. Next up, I obviously have to include Sunrise on the Reaping, which was my first 5-star read of 2025. This one, obviously, I was so excited about. I'm a big fan of The Hunger Games. I read it. They became really popular when I was graduating high school in grade 12, and all the movies came out during my undergrad. So I have just a really a strong attachment to these characters. So I really enjoyed getting Haymitch's experience with the Hunger Games. I love how we get a lot of tie-ins to some of the characters that we meet, especially in Catching Fire, and how they're all have this history together. I was really excited, and this one broke me. It was really heartbreaking, and I haven't, this one I think is on par to Catching Fire. For Catching Fire is my favorite book of the trilogy. I really enjoyed The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but this one, there was just something really special about Haymitch's story. It adds so much more depth to him and kind of where we're introduced to him as in the first trilogy. So definitely really enjoyed this one, and I'm really excited for the movie as well coming out this year. This is another 5-star read, and it is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is her newest kind of fantasy duology. I really loved her Shepherd King duology. I was so obsessed with that one, and I really love her world and atmosphere. So this is her newest one that kind of skews, again, on the romantasy side. But we follow this girl named Sybil who works at basically kind of this church where she is a seer, and slowly the other people that are in the program with her are slowly disappearing, and she teams up with a knight. There's just such amazing writing that goes into here to create such the atmosphere that we have, the fog, the kingdom, what the sense of unease that you have, and kind of using the religion side of things to really kind of add to that eeriness and sense of unease. I'm really excited to see how this one, ends with the duology coming out this summer, and I'm so excited for that one. So yeah, this was just a fun romantasy. It's a little bit, I would say, more steamy than the Shepherd King duology, but nevertheless, I really enjoyed this one, and I couldn't put it down. Like, I read through it pretty quickly, so I really enjoyed this one. Next, I have the Martha's Vineyards Beach and Book Club by Martha Hall Kelly. This one was a very interesting kind of historical fiction. I've loved this author. She has done the Faraday family series, which is one of my favorite historical fiction, they're independent stories, but we follow the same family basically during the Civil War, World War I, and World War II, and their story and involvement there. So this one's a little bit different. It kind of takes place in modern day, where we find this young woman whose mother has recently passed away, and in her papers she finds a lot of things related to this artist who lives on Martha's Vineyard. So she wants to really connect with her mom and figure out why she had a lot of things about this artist. So she goes to Martha's Vineyard, and this artist starts to tell her the story of the family that used to live at the house that she currently lives in. So we get kind of the past storyline, which takes place during World War II, and it follows 3 young women and their mother who live in this house in Martha's Vineyard, and their experience during World War II. There was a lot of troops that were training for D-Day and Normandy and all those things on the beaches there, but because of the troop activity there was also German subs passing by. There's rumors of a German spy amongst them. Kind of goes from there, and they're kind of interconnected. I really enjoyed this one. It was interesting learning about kind of what people's lives were, especially the women's lives were like during World War II in this area of the US. Was really interesting, and I wouldn't think it makes sense, but I wouldn't think of German subs passing by or all those things, and spies and all that stuff. So it was a really interesting story, and kind of that home front kind of untold story of the women's experience made it really interesting as well. So again, a very unique World War II historical fiction that doesn't necessarily focus on Europe, but is very much kind of the American perspective at home, which was really interesting. I think when I'm looking at my list here, I think this is probably my favorite book of the entire year, and it is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. You've probably heard me talk about this book a lot since I've read it, but this book crushed me. All of the praise that you hear for this book are well warranted, but we follow Joan, who is coming up to be basically trained to become an astronaut in the 60s and 70s, and we follow her kind of falling in love with a fellow astronaut. But what is interesting about this book is that we start kind of at the present day, and she is mission control at home while all of her other people, sorry, my light kind of switched here, but it follows all of the other people who, her cohorts in her group that came up for astronaut training are all up in space, and something has gone catastrophically wrong. So as her experience of training to become an astronaut, falling in love, all these things, intermittent with that, we get the present day storyline, and literally the last 20 pages or so destroyed me. I literally was sobbing. I was so emotionally invested in this story. It is heartbreaking. It is a beautiful love story, and I highly recommend this one. It's a really fantastic read. I got it for my sister for Christmas too, so I highly recommend it. Next up, I have Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Farcio trilogy, and this one I think is my favorite of the series overall. Basically, the premise is that we follow Fitz, who is the illegitimate son of the king in waiting, and we follow his experience kind of, growing up knowing that he is the illegitimate son, and we follow him basically from a child into adulthood. And the second book in particular is very much a character study or character focus, where we're getting all of these kind of, stories and, experiences of these characters over time. Sorry, Willow's kind of wiggling under my chair here. But basically, we kind of get these character focuses and these little moments between characters that are eventually building to something bigger. The last kind of 100 pages of this book were super suspenseful, and I really enjoyed it. So I can see why this trilogy is really, well loved and praised. So I'm excited to kind of continue on with this, interconnected series next with the Red Ship trilogy, so I'm excited to dive in. But yeah, I can see why this fantasy series is so beloved. Next up, I have Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This book I listened to on audiobook and I really enjoyed it. I remember I was doing a bunch of weeding in the garden and I just was listening to my audiobook, just kept going, and this book really was just a lot of fun. But basically it follows two people who have this connection, have this really awesome first date, but she is basically leaving to another state the next day, and so they decide to try a long distance relationship, and it kind of goes from there. This book tackles a lot of, similar to Emily Henry, it tackles a lot of very difficult subject matter, like abusive relationships, having a parent with dementia, and kind of the caretaker burden and things that comes with that. It got to the point where so many bad things were happening, like you have to suspend some of your disbelief with some of the things that happen. But I really enjoyed it. I really loved the characters. I really loved getting both perspectives of the people in the relationship, and I felt like the challenges and obstacles that they face were really realistic. There wasn't like miscommunication, but it is challenges that arise from long distance relationships that felt realistic, which I really enjoyed. So this is definitely one of my favorite kind of romances that I read of this year, and definitely one of my favorite romance authors as well. Next, I have The Impossible Fortune by Richard Osman. This is the newest installment in the Thursday Murder Club series, but because this is kind of they're interconnected, I won't talk too much about the premise of this one, but basically this series follows 4 retirees that live in a retirement village, and to pass their time they kind of solve murders that kind of fall in their lap essentially, or they find ways to insert themselves into murder investigations. So there's a lot of humor despite this being kind of related to murder mysteries and kind of that dark subject matter. The author adds in a lot of humor to his writing that makes it really fun. The banter between these characters that I think is really where this series shines. And this book in particular, the last book that came out prior to this one, really ends with one of the characters going through a really big life experience, and so they're very much kind of, their world is still off tilt. They're going through a lot of grief, and kind of seeing her kind of overcome and kind of get back to who we kind of know her as was really, I think, really moving to kind of see her do that. And again, we always still have those like character dynamics and all that fun stuff, but I felt like that emotional development of this character was really a joy to kind of experience. Next, I have The Black Wolf by Louise Penny. This is the newest installment in the Inspector Gamache series, and I was so excited for this one. This is basically a part 2 to The Grey Wolf, and again, because these are kind of interconnected, it's basically a part 2 to The Grey Wolf. I won't talk too much about the plot, but basically this series follows Inspector Gamache, who's head of the homicide department in Quebec, and a lot of his stories involve murder mysteries in this small town called Three Pines, which is very much Stars Hollow vibes. So again, despite this kind of being dark subject matter that deals with murder and all of those things, it basically, there's a lot of sense of found family, all those emotions and stuff like that. So it is very touching series. You love these characters, you love the dynamics, even how the food is described, there's a sense of warmth to it, and how the human spirit, how good human nature can persevere. This one is kind of more focusing on like a global aspect, so this one takes place more in Three Pines than The Grey Wolf did, but it's definitely much more on a bigger scale than some of the ones that are just exclusively kind of in Three Pines or Montreal and that kind of area. This one definitely reaches a broader demo or like area basically, but I still really enjoyed this. So again, this is my favorite series of all time. And kind of to end out the list, I have 2 non-fictions. First up, I have 107 Days by Kamala Harris. This is her book accounting basically the 107 days that she had for her campaign of when Joe Biden basically dropped out and nominated her for the presidential race. This is one that I listened to on audiobook, and I was listening to it while driving to work, and it gave me just a sense of dread because you can't help but feel hopeful, especially with the momentum that we had throughout the campaign, but how it ends. And I think she's being really honest in this. She's like, I should have done this differently. I regret doing this, or I regret that this happened, or I should have handled this better. And I think it's a very honest take on her experience and what you know, really has never happened before in history. It is still really upsetting how everything has played out and is currently playing out now. But yeah, this one I think is a very important read, so I enjoyed this one despite that sense of dread and anxiety that kind of came along with it. I'm excited too because me and my sister are seeing her for her book tour in February, which is really exciting, so she'll be talking about this as well. So having read the book, I think also will provide a little bit more context for what she talks about when she comes and visits my city, but that's just, you know, something fun as well. And lastly, I have the Romanov Sisters by Helen Rappaport. This is a book that has been on my TBR for a while, and over kind of my holiday break from work and having time off, I became really addicted to puzzles, and so I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to, you know, listen to audiobooks while I can puzzle, because I could like sit down to puzzle, 4 hours would go by and I'd come out and see my husband and like bleary-eyed, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's already 4 o'clock. So I have a puzzling problem right now, but basically this kind of provides more historical background and information on who the kind of Romanov sisters were. One of kind of the main themes that she talks about is how the sisters were always kind of grouped together as the girls, or, you know, the princesses, and they never really had their own kind of personality or individualism to society or those people around them. So this kind of gives more information and more perspective of who they were, you know, at this time period. So it includes a lot of letters they wrote to each other, letters from other people as well, or diary entries of the people around them. So it provides more, you know, context of who these, you know, young women were. Again, this is one where I had this like sense of dread, because you know how it ends basically, and it actually like is, I don't know what it is about this moment in history, learning about in school, and just the brutality of their murders that really made it, that really still even upsets me kind of reading about this. But this one, she kind of, you know, mentions what happens, but she doesn't go into depth of the brutality of it, which I appreciated, because I felt like I was really anxious, kind of, especially when you know it is like coming to the end basically. She does have another book that talks about the final days of the Romanovs, which I do want to read, but it's, I think I need to be in a good headspace. But this obviously was very well researched. Basically the last like fifth of the book is just all references, and there's like, you know, everything cited in terms of, you know, direct quotation, so it's well researched. I felt like it didn't read like a history book. It felt like a novelization, including a lot of, you know, facts and citations and diary entries and all those things. So I really appreciate it. I liked kind of learning more about them, but again, I just have that, I don't know, there's something about the brutality of these children's end that still, even learning when I learned about this in high school, still really bothers me now. But it was, you know, I think it was worth the read, and definitely want to check out more of her works. Just, again, want to be in a better headspace. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of your favorite books of 2025 were, and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.